seated in the back, great, or in the front, wherever you can find a seat. Thank you for coming in on such a beautiful, beautiful day. What a fine day for this event. I think I speak for all the faculty when I say that these student readings, both by our undergraduates and especially by our MFA students, are really our favorite events of the year, and it's something we're alternating between weeping and congratulating. You'll probably see some of that later. I'm Lisa Russbar. I directed the creative writing program I have this past year. I want to welcome all of you, families, lovers, friends. Some students I think are here as well, and teachers. I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank some people. First and foremost, I think the faculty. None of us would be here if there weren't these marvelous teachers. So maybe a round of applause for our fiction teachers. I also need to thank two people who, I mean, it's a three-legged stool in this program, and it just would fall without Barbara Moriarty, who keeps the coffee fresh and the tea kettle boiling and the cookies and brings the love. Barbara Moriarty. And also beautifully complimenting and doing things that none of us are able to do is the Associate Director, Jeb Livinggood, who just kind of keeps the trains running on time and knows how to talk to people that we don't know how to talk to, talk in numbers and things like that. So thank you, Jeb. I'm going to get out of the way and make room for the writers, but the way it'll work is sort of outlined here, and we're going to go in alphabetical order, alternating between poetry and fiction. And the third years who are stepping up and are going to be fourth years next year will do the introductions, and I'll let them introduce themselves to you. That's kind of a threshold that we have here, so a ritual of ours. So I think Elena is going to start us off, and her introducer will now come to the podium. No.
Some lives are gifted with a person who listens, waits, then quietly slays you with insight. But only some of these lives are fortunate to have as this person, Elena Chung. I've loved Elena's poems from the start of this program, but was surprised and humbled one afternoon when she shared with me some poets who she loves most, who at first seemed contradictions to me. But that's just it. While, this is from a poem, in small towns too, lines dictate my feet's course. Elena's poems reveal boundaries by crossing them. Here, the line is a lens. Form has human weight and moral heft. Elena's work pushes meaning in simultaneous directions. One is 20 and holding, as though to fight for youth, which fleets, yet holding my head over a chest. Duality inhabits tenderness, and language navigates identity, as one speaker claims, so I can suffer how I like, and in my own invention. Still, a Keatsian beauty ramifies the truth of such invention, as the clouds clench over her building, as the sky becomes sandalwood. From English to Korean, from film studies to food prep, Elena hones a hypercorrect naming of things. These poems make sense in the most active and literal meaning of that phrase. Please join me in welcoming Elena Chung.
So I just wanted to start by thanking all my peers in the MFA and my professors, especially those of you on my thesis committee, Lisa, Deborah, and Rita, and my family who is here, and Barb and Jeb. So this first poem contains the title of my thesis, which is Craft Knife, and the only thing you have to know is that is Korean slang for iced Americano, because that's the first syllable of iced and Americano. And the second thing is that I really hate Panera, the franchise. It's called Classified. I noticed the kimchi juice staining my Y shirt after my job interview, my midday corn tea volunteer shift. The jar purchased 6 months ago from a super 2 hours out in the county. I refuse to stay a transitional week, despite my love for the artistic pursuits of children. Mornings now are for toast over easy eggs. Then I type gerunds next to A's, Panera's shit pastries. This, my new cafe, thank you. My buttered tongue, my interior limited to the interpretation of digital pixels. Christ, I hope I am not myself as I seem to me. I walk home, set my coffee table's folding legs on library books to make it tall. On top, that stained jar I soaked for hours houses my ruler, my gel pens, my craft knife dull and browning. This is my train. My train has cable. Dogs are encouraged, treated to turkey bones, recycled from my train's industrial kitchen. In the cafe car, options range from cold-cut sandwiches wrapped in clear plastic to those same sandwiches heated up in the industrial kitchen's microwave oven. People love my train. They take planes to just sit there, to recline in its auburn velvet seats. They wait for no particular stop, and dread the moment they finally must leave my train, return to their husbands, wives, children. My train will not be used as a set for the next Hollywood hit starring Michael Fassbender as outlaw train robber or sexy European doctor. My train is not a metaphor for social hierarchy. It refuses, in fact, all society. Parkour is not allowed on my train or anywhere near it. I say, stay as long as you want. Your children will learn to survive on instant noodles and fig Newtons. Stay. Look, my train does not negotiate with terrorists, does not contain tree nuts, following an incident involving trail mix which led to the revocation of my train's Michelin star. My train is banned from 50 countries. My train eats its young, respects no man. In the morning, before the sun's first beam hits the glass pane of the carriages, my train is almost silent, gliding on the solid metal tracks staked deep in the muddy ground. It goes where it was. These next two poems are like little twin poems about fishing, which I've only been fishing once. The first one is called Catch And. A vigilant dad, closed-toed shoes, rod, line, and hook are essential. Sharp-eyed or not, my dad can't swim, meaning I must be the dad. Professionals have radar, their speedy boats to dock in private waters. I have my own inheritance of bad eyes and one hungry, dad not dad mouth to feed. Desperate, I lean back in my lawn chair and fall asleep, the reel resting in my netted cup holder. I dream what all dads must dream about, golf trips to Miami, a trunk full of baseball hats. When I wake up, I palm a cricket. As dad, I get to decide where all the bugs go. I sanction spaces where they can rest their compound eyes. Yes, even dads know the stress of being small, going unnoticed. That poem contains a lie about my dad, which is that he can swim. He can, in fact, swim. The next poem is called Release. I want no part of it, yet turn to see a man throw lines, a motor dipping into a cloud. The ardent water bugs flash and rattle off their liquid film. His netted face unblinking, light cuts cubes across his cheeks. I cannot bear a lifeless open eye, the sun cascading down the mouth of a sea, etc. Still, I know the need to hold the slick Piscine form, to provide or be provided for. On the boat, he feeds it back to the water. He lets me take a breath. This next poem is, I wrote it in Deborah's class. It's Otava Rima. It's called Omurace. The electric stove heats uneven, so perfect is out of the question. Mom will call soon. It's just a matter of when she wakes. I've already run the usual route. Farmer's market, the butcher, patisserie, then showered, scrubbed down my heels. In just a tea, I Google how to make a demi-glace. Dissolve a stock cube, heat butter. I dice an onion and blame my unsharp knife for slipping on the slick inner skin when I know it's my grip that's cut me open. Saturday mornings go like this new circadian, fully solar. I purchase food to make my meals, squint at my phone, already bits of veggies sticking to the screen, and cook. Solitude's a small pan, and the frozen spring onions wilting hiss. The grand omelets of the world would shun my crude opus, but I am happy eating it. This portmanteau I've loved since Mom started packing my lunch so she could brag to other moms. Back then, the eggs more sheet than blanket, and she drew faces with the ketchup that got ruined in my backpack. Carrot eyes restored by a plastic fork I stole from the condiment cart up where the big kids ate. Today, no faces, just the sure voice on the other end of the line, the phone pressed up against my shoulder, telling me, Elena, you need real fire for that. It makes a kind of difference you just feel. I read this poem to my mom when I first read it, and I was like, oh, is it okay that I lied about the fact that you used to pack me lunches? And she said, yeah, it's okay, because that's something that I would do. This is my last poem for today. It was a product of my wild card from Rita, which was to write about, so my sisters are named Hazel and Haley, and I am named Elena. So the prompt was to write about the letter H and like sort of dealing with that letter. So, Musica recta. The Germans call it H to us, B natural, that whole tone below C. Haphazard nomenclature, the difficulty of reading old scores, where the ink stops and starts. Or simply, it was the next letter and had to follow. How I signed my emails, the initial my friends have started to call me by. My sisters bear it too in English, our rotating symbol. Myself from the Greek woman, H from Eminem's daughter, H from a girl in a YA novel. It's the last scale I learned to play. All those accidentals, I hit nodes if I went too fast. PJ said, if your hand can't get there in time, try for the edge of the bar. The synthetic resonating under the green tufts of mallet. I stayed after school a lot to practice, even when I got good. I bought M&Ms and listened to Kais and Ricardo try to play pop songs by ear. Somebody that I used to know, call me maybe. I learned it then, the boys peddling musical cryptograms on the vibraphones, the ominous chromatic of Bach, Fab, an echo down the hall where the guard girls did choreo, the strange addition in ache, that minor chord cut open. Thank you.
I'm introducing Cassie. Hi, Cassie. Cassie Davies is Closer. Is that better?
Yeah.
Good. Cassie Davies is a writer who works on the frontier. Standing at the line between autobiography and fiction, she fiercely examines the lives of people caught between power and powerlessness, innocence and fault, their real bodies and their inauthentic ones. I say people, but actually it is women who are the centre of Cassie's work. And naturally so, Cassie works partly in memoir. But the centering of girls and women in her work forms a point of view, one that is brutal and illuminating. A young model suffers the cruelties and absurdities of the modelling world, whilst also enjoying the preferential treatment she receives in society, turning her nose up at regular people, refusing at times to even make eye contact with them. Similarly, an 8-year-old's bullying and manipulation of a friend is examined not just as a side effect of childhood trauma, but also as the pleasure she takes in the power this manipulation gives her. Cassie achieves this deep looking at people without simplification and condemnation, for the lives of her narrators and characters are shown to be lives of myriad truths and contradictory facts. Her narrators are never the heroes of their own story, and even when they are victims, they are never perfect victims. They probe the validity of what they know, and are honest about when and what they don't remember. In the end, this refusal to look away from human deficiency, even from her own, feels not just urgent and necessary, but like the work of a writer who will always endeavour to tell the truth. Cassie's prose is clear and translucent, the kind that makes a character's physical sensations the reader's. Reading her work for me is a little like looking into one of those rivers or lakes so clean and clear that you can see all the way to the bottom of it, fitting for a writer who is always trying to get all the way down. It is my great pleasure now to welcome Cassie Davies.
Thank you for that. Can everyone hear me at the back? Helen? I first of all want to thank Jane for being such an incredible teacher, reader, and a friend too. My writing wouldn't be what it is today if it weren't for you. And thank you to the program for being such an open and supportive community. I felt very much at home here. Lisa, Barbara, where are you? Jeb, I'm so grateful for everything you've done for me. Thank you to my friends, Anna and Katie, Helen, Bobby and Victoria, and the most important thank you of all to my boyfriend Piers. I'm going to read a section from a short story I wrote last fall called Malibu. It wasn't part of my thesis. And the story is set in a town in England, and the narrator is with her 2 friends, Brendan and Hannah, on a Saturday afternoon on their way to a park, and they're all 13 years old. Brendan unzipped his backpack and handed me a stark white bottle with a shiny black screw cap. There was an image of 2 palm trees and a sunset printed on its body. The word Malibu curved above the sunset, and below it said Caribbean rum. I'd never drunk rum before, but I imagined it would taste something like the mouth-burning vodka my Polish grandmother gave me when I got food poisoning from her fried chicken one summer. Go on then, Hannah said, nudging me with her elbow. You'll like it, Brendan said. They stood on either side of me, watching, waiting for me to open the bottle. They both knew this was my first time getting drunk. That was the whole point of us meeting up that Saturday, to get me pissed and to get pissed with me. I twisted the black cap, a motion that came with a series of sharp snaps. The mouth of the bottle was small, the kind that asked for a whole mouth to meet it. I sucked my lips around the glass rim, which was thick and cold, and raised the bottle. I took a gulp. The taste blasted my mouth. It was sweet, almost too sweet, like a mouthful of syrup with a hint of coconut. But there was another, deeper layer behind the sickly sweetness, something stronger, like a punch that leaves a bruise. My eyes watered. Hannah laughed. "Give it here," she said. I passed the bottle to her. She took a swig and then passed it to Brendan, who did the same and then passed it back to me. They looked cool when they drank, uninterested, unafraid. I tried to look like them. I took larger gulps each time it was my turn. And then I found myself wanting more than Hannah and Brendan, and they let me have it. I wanted to know what it felt like to be drunk, pissed, sloshed. This wasn't a half-assed attempt. I was 13 years old and I wanted the alcohol to slap me in the face. We drank the Malibu in 10 minutes and tossed the empty bottle into the garbage bin. I didn't feel anything at first, apart from a sense of triumph for getting away with it. The alcohol was in my body now, making its invisible course, and no policeman could search inside of me. Brendan suggested we return to Calverley, and so we turned and headed back to the park. Hannah began to giggle. "What's so funny?" I asked. My question only caused her to laugh more. She had the laugh of a mischievous child, one who plays where they shouldn't, or who takes what their mother forbids them. I didn't always believe this laugh. There was a fake, silly ring to it. She gave too much laughter to things that didn't deserve it, and the more she laughed, the less funny the thing became. She doubled over and slapped her thighs. Were the tears in her eyes real? We stumbled up the path, our steps less deliberate this time. I slept on the dirt and banged my knee on a bulging root, and Hannah, who was walking a step behind me, crashed into me, causing us both to fall over. We shrieked at first, and then our shrieks turned into laughter. Hannah lay on top of me while my body was pressed against the dirt, but neither of us could pull ourselves up because the gracelessness of the situation was too funny. An hour ago, such a fall would have humiliated me, but now, with rum in my body, it felt so good to be on the floor, writhing and giggling and gasping. There was a dim throb in my knee, but the sensation wasn't painful. It was more movement than feeling, as though marbles were rolling and colliding under my skin. I tried to wriggle from under Hannah, and she attempted to pull herself up, but the laughter and alcohol had turned our bodies to jelly. "I can't," she said, wiping genuine tears from her eyes. I couldn't either. I wanted to stay there, beneath her, lost in laughter. It was as though my body was no longer made of skin and bone and muscle, but jelly, all jelly. It wobbled and bounced with my laughs. There was nothing else in that moment, no parents with their picnic blankets and children, no tennis players, no elderly bowlers, no kids smoking weed several feet away from us. We had become the laughter, or the laughter had become us, and nothing could interrupt our bubble of joy, our carelessness, apart from Brendan. "What the fuck are you doing?" He looked down at us from the clearing, his body distinctly unjelly-like. "What are you doing?" Hannah replied. We cackled some more. Brendan walked away and left us to it. We eventually managed to pull ourselves up to the clearing, where Brendan lay on his back, gazing at the sky. Hannah lay next to him, turned on her side, and crossed her arm and leg over his body. He turned his face and kissed her. They stayed like that, bodies wrapped, nose to nose. I knew that I could have laid down beside them and they would have included me in their embrace, as they often did, but I didn't join them this time. I wanted to move around. I wanted to feel the drunkenness in my body. It felt good, this looseness in my limbs, a kind of freedom, a disconnection, as though my brain and body were no longer in sync. Responses slowed, feet in wrong place, step, back, swing, arm, wobble, knees, twist. It was like dancing, but dancing without the fear of doing it badly and looking like an idiot. Stand in the middle of the clearing and just do it. Fucking swing, hips, loosen. Who cares if anyone is watching? You over there, you smoking bitches sitting in a circle. Don't you wish you were having this much fun? Look at me, 13 years old, sun out, afternoon sinking, falling into shadow, air calling to crisp to cold, and raising goosebumps on my arms and legs. God, it felt good not to care. Why care? Shit, dickhead, twat, couldn't stop moving. Yes, my tits are fake, but so what? So what if my chest is as flat as a plank of wood? Step forward, step left, twist my foot into the dirt, avoid the fox shit. What are you doing? She says. Come over here, he says. Why are they still lying down over there? It's more fun up here. walk towards them, can't walk straight, laugh, swing, pick up, and slice. Before I tell you about the shard of glass that punctured my foot, I will tell you about the shoes I was wearing. They were ballet pumps, decorated in faux leopard print. I bought them at the Primark in on London's Oxford Street for £6. I used to hate ballet pumps. I liked wearing trainers and sporty clothes that were anything but girly, but these leopard print shoes seemed appropriate for my transformed 13-year-old self. The denim skirt was new too, as was the colourful low top and my fake boobs, and my mother was happy about my change of style. I was finally dressing like a girl. I looked good. Boys had begun to notice and fancy me. But the leopard print shoes, since they were so cheap, had flimsy soles, comparable to an orange peel. You could have taken a knife and sliced the sole into segments. If I had been wearing my old trainers, the glass probably wouldn't have made it through the thick wedge of rubber to my skin so easily. But then again, if I had been wearing my old trainers, I wouldn't have been this girl drunk in the park in the middle of the day with a shard of glass in my foot. I sat down, careful not to put any pressure on my punctured foot, and observed the glass. I had never been a squeamish person when it came to cuts and blood. Had always regarded needles in my arm with a kind of fascination, and while some things were painful, I had learned that if I really focused on the pain, the sensation of it, I could detach myself from the hurt and regard it with curiosity rather than distress. What was happening under my skin to cause such an intense sensation? I knew that it was something to do with nerves split, shocked, shaking. I wondered about this as I pinched the shard of glass between my thumb and forefinger and extracted it from my foot and shoe. It came out easily. The piece of glass was clear, probably from a broken bottle, and the spike that had punctured my foot was about 3 inches long. I slipped off my shoe and tried to look at the gash in my skin, but the gushing blood made it hard to see. I called out to Hannah and Brendan. "I stepped on glass," I said. Brendan jumped up and ran over. "Fuck," he said. He scooped me up like a baby and carried me across the clearing and down the steep path. I thought he was being a bit melodramatic, but I liked being in his arms. The weight of my body didn't seem to concern him, which impressed me, nor did the slipperiness of the path, this path that had been such a hassle to climb before, like an obstacle course. Or was it all just our fear that had made it so? Hannah followed behind us. The public toilets were at the bottom of the path, and Brendan pushed open the door to the women's and set me down on the tiled floor. The tiles were white, which was unfortunate, but what concerned me even more was the uncleanliness of it. I hated dirty rooms, and I imagined that the floor of a public toilet was where all the world's scum gathered. "Wrap her foot up," he said to Hannah. "I'll wait outside." I was wearing new tights, which the blood had soaked and turned into a red sock. Hannah went into each of the 3 stalls in search of toilet paper, but as usual in this public toilet, there was nothing. She opened the door to Brendan, who was waiting right there, loyal and afraid, and told him to get some napkins from the cafe. I decided, since my tights were already ruined, that the best course of action was to take them off and use them as a bandage. Hannah helped me to wriggle the tight elastic from my waist, over my bum, along my thighs, and off my feet, stumbling as she did so. The sight of her drunk body made me laugh, which caused her to laugh too. This whole situation, we realized, was hilarious. "Maybe we should wash your foot," she said. I thought this was a good idea. She helped me up. The sinks were built into the wall, the kind of rectangular aluminum caves that, with the detection of a hand, spurted some soap, then showered a pathetic amount of water, before blowing a warm breath of air. The automated system was not built for a bloody foot like mine. I lifted it into the tub nonetheless, and avoided the spurt of soap, and then rinsed off the blood in the sprinkle of water. The shower didn't last long enough to rinse the sink, and I felt bad for the future toilet user who would have to witness such a massacre. Hannah lowered me back to the floor and helped me wrap my tights around my foot. She knotted it 3 times. With this bandage tied in place and the blood under control, we both leaned back against the wall and rested our heads together. A woman walked in with a small girl. "Oh dear," she said. "Do you need help?" She was dressed in loose white trousers and a flowery shirt, I guess she was in her 30s, not much younger than my mother, who had had me when she was 23. The girl must have been 6 or 7, dressed in a little white summer dress and pink sandals. Her blonde hair slicked back into 2 neat braids. I attempted to put on a convincing sober face and voice. I stepped on some glass, but don't worry, we have everything under control. Thank you.
Emily Lawson's thesis, Endlings, is a gem you can turn over and over as it continues to catch and refract the light. It is full of lapidary poems that leave a crystallized after image in your mind and stalk your heart. Endlings grapples with, but also illuminates, the ways we are haunted by loss and death, both personal and on the scale of species, endangered and extinct. For Emily, death is not an end, but an opening through which to consider what remains: imprints, footprints, artifacts, language, memories, loved ones. To encounter Emily's work is to encounter something rare. Her words are burnished, polished with attention in her hands. Her poems are striking and original, musical and luminous, multi-layered and infinitely perceptive. Emily's poems live in a liminal space between the real and the unreal, waking and sleep, this world and the other world. They are decidedly ethereal, and yet are also deeply rooted in the material and particularly the natural world. In Emily's own words, we have just one chance to love the world before we lose it. And love the world she does, even as it vanishes. Emily's eyes, mind, heart, and spirit are always open, attentive, and receptive, as evidenced in her poems, but also in her person. She has been a beacon of light in this program for all of us, accessible, kind, hardworking, and gracious. I love and admire Emily and her work from the bottom of my heart. Please join me in celebrating Emily Lawson.
Anita, that was beautiful. Thank you. To everyone, I just want to say being part of this program is some of the best things that ever happened to me, and I'm so grateful to be here. To my committee, to my loved ones, you all know who you are, and I love you. Thank you. Okay. Was that a lot? Okay. Migration elegy. Among the fluttering leaves, I see one flare, my first in years. Barefoot on frost, I step out to meet the wanderer, glimpse its signature black-veined hind wings, the tiny flying carpet of tiger skin. It's unseasonal. It will ice, lacquer over, or starve for absent dame's rockets, coneflowers, other weedy confections. In girlhood, I swooped the fields by the playground alone with my makeshift net, a tunnel of gauze knit between sticks. On my little clipboard, I catalogued what I caught: yellow, white, monarch, always too many to track. During my lifetime, over half Earth's mass of insects has vanished, more than the human weight on the world. And of Western monarchs, 99%, so most, they die with roadside milkweed, the only place to lay the single green or cream-colored egg, tiny, beneath the velvet leaf on the mass journey south. Among our last mysteries, this serial migration, that it happens at all. The theory of the inherited map, no use. Still, they've always descended into those valleys, odd as black magic, blanketing the sacred firs in their ardor, fire spearing the blotted, spangled sky. Once a flaming cathedral, enormous as a city,
cell dust shimmered down like radium. Now, a miniature temple of loss, the single acre's burning edges, well contained. If this is my last sighting, let me recall how it flashed here, splicing the light, faltering, heading skyward again. Okay. Sleeper car. I love my bunk in this train's tiny ward, its pilled fleece sheet and disposable pillow slip. How each object vibrates slightly on the nightstand. Past the window's spittled sheen, creaks behind cul-de-sacs suck on their shopping carts and high chairs. It's easy to mistake awake for alive, as I'm waking to say aloud, I'm alive. Dawn trees flash, tattooed backs of warehouses collapse. Don't ruin everything, I say, drift off. Then kids run laughing down the rickety corridor. The conductor makes an announcement on the intercom. My brother is stricken by night terrors, imagining his death. He's young and healthy, I remind him. But it's the concept of nothingness, oblivion, that keeps him up. I say, you won't be there to feel it. But that's the thing. From the train, sun on frost makes fields of glittered lace. But today, I'm so tired. I'm hardly living. Despite the rocking, the ambient rumble, no one can sleep on this train. Through the dim hours, gentle voices, footsteps, weeping, card games, ancient doors sliding open to the night winds. You can point away from the self and touch with your finger an atmosphere of common loss. And now in the woods past the window, total beauty, neither good nor bad, flailing, half-eaten salamander, web-stuck moth, wren returning daily to her nest of crushed eggs. Here, droplets worm across dusty glass, the fogged sun blares, and I want to be here for this, alive. At a station, the attendant lowers a blue stool, opens a black umbrella. I won't rain on everything. I'll arrive on time and spread my arms, find the words to reframe, reposition the fact. I slip back into dream life, its endless compartments, into the dead straight lines of the rainfall which the board from here, which on hitting the ground vanish. When I think of being awake, my muscles shake. Death's nothing like sleep, we know that. Becoming part of something else, a small consolation. Somewhere, fir branches dangle their 1,000 glass beads, sugar spun opals smashed, bright yolks pulled slowly out and swallowed. My thesis contains a crown of prose sonnets. Each one is named for a room in a house. And all you need to know is that the speaker is a ghost who is haunting these rooms. Bedroom. I watch the bruise move over the walls, the way it spreads, floral. The warm hand of the bed opens. I'm not content. Soft voices pass through, but wordless. In the dream, masted ships part the curtains as they exit. The sailing voices, so alive in their consort. But I was loosed, a hat full of doves. Days shrunk down like blackening teeth. No silent body here, nude and bent. My form collapsed under the flung sheet. And you were walking in your cap and mackintosh into the field, now empty of horses. And on its own, the door swung shut. Panic room. It closes over me, the pilled sheet of stone. When I turn over the snow globe, the sky churns, and my hair stands straight up, a flaming tree. Two bright wires might meet, true. They can't erase us all. The needle pricks me as I wait. Embroider what I know, suture the dark to dark, or nurse a guttering glint. Old tins. Someday I'll raise the lid and wet, climb into a field of empty forms, or shades of centaurs maimed loping over the dead white moors. Still worn ghosts or worse, I'll thread your likenesses, repeat the lonely word. Empty room. Nowhere here. My eyes, nowhere. Yours, unsearching. When I vanished, nothing noticed. Not the web-dangled leaves held stunned in the air. Not the darting barn cat. not the faraway cargo ships cresting apocalyptic waves through the squalls, or the last flaming acre of monarchs overwintering, or distant, lingering acrobats about to step into deadly space under the tense meringue fellow, or the invisible paltry stars. Worse things happened. The weather here grew obscenely lovely, the great globe of the world just spinning. Tack room. I can hold all of it. Here in this dream, we choose bridles and approach the winged horses who toss and tremble, flaring. In our fists, cubes dampen, form sweet grit. We wait, only children, at the velvet muzzles, but the swan wings unfurl. The 1,000 suns start closing. Wait, I call. Now, bare rooms pass under swells of dark. Now my hands are empty, even of themselves. You left, and I stayed to see. Someday, I know, I'll go, but a world let me look a little longer, even to watch dust spin in the last beam, even to watch the breeze move over the walls. And this is my last poem. It's a love poem. Metaphysics is a dead field, but I studied philosophy before. But in the conventional world, light tilts in. I stop to make a shadow of a hand, because today the birds are sounding out so furiously. Because earlier I passed a small child singing, "Happy birthday, happy birthday." Driving west, you saw a vision of your late father in the book cliffs. He looked out from a high ridge over you, the fading hills. That day I sat on the porch after the guests left, holding a cold glass to my temple. I closed my eyes against the sun, watched its imprints. Now it is raining softly. What do we remember from life? Almost nothing. Not this. Not the way the evening cliffs are halved by sun. You fought to scramble up the rocks to find him, but kept driving. Wondered if you missed your chance. I felt his presence so strongly in the world then. I was certain that he was, and that he knew me, you wrote. Now water shakes over twigs and shingles, that gentle noise. I am saying, I'll still love you after I'm dead. I mean this, I'll find a way, how a life could float by and wait. Hard listening, bucking hydrangeas, a sudden spatter of gray, then clearing. I'm asking it all to surprise me. No, asking myself to be surprised. Your red truck, small as a toy from that height. How the soft, heavy bees stay afloat like that, even that.
Late last August, first and second year fiction MFAs met in order to get to know one another before the fall semester began. Walking over, I was a ball of nerves in a way that made me feel vaguely as though it was my first day of elementary school. Though everyone was incredibly kind, it was only when I found myself sitting next to Anna that my anxiety began to dissipate. She appeared to somehow sense my nervousness and know exactly how to put me at ease, asking me questions about myself and my writing, and generally doing what she could to make me feel at home. This gesture was a small thing, but I think it speaks to the vital empathy and perception that lie at the core of Anna's writing. She sketches each of her characters with the greatest sensitivity and tenderness. Even the lives of parenthetical characters, a nanny sitting across from her protagonist on a bus, for instance, become, through a few key brushstrokes, palpable as though we can lift their lids off and examine the thoughts swirling inside their heads. And there is room within each of her characters for all of the contradiction and complexity of real life. An elderly woman bickers with her gentle husband, forgetting he once felt like a new heir. Set against her sick brother, a girl imagines herself as resolutely healthy, offensively robust. In Anna's thesis, which tells the story of a family that rotates around a central, world-collapsing trauma, emotion is never blunt or one-dimensional. Trauma and grief and humor are masterfully woven into every corner of the world she depicts, into the said and unsaid, into memory, and into the nuanced ways
her characters relate to one another. And it's just all these beautiful little moments that accumulate to, by the work's end, lend her reader an entirely new perspective on her subject, whether femininity or illness or love. It's been a privilege to read Anna's writing this year in workshop, and we're lucky to hear some of it today. Please join me in welcoming Anna Pitcher.
Hello, is that all right? Okay. I have too many thank yous. I'm just incredibly grateful to be in this program. So I will just say thank you to everyone who has supported me in my writing life, especially Jane, and to everyone who has supported me in my life. I only really write about sex and grief. And one of those subjects did not feel appropriate with my parents here. That was grief. So today I will be reading parts of my short story Factory. All you need to know is that the narrator is a life model and she's posing for an artist and his studio is in a converted biscuit factory. You got all that? And by biscuit I mean cookie. There is something crystallizing about being naked and looked at and slightly cold. You can sense your edges like you have a fine ink outline. It was dark outside now, but the lamp by Feo's easel held us both in a pool of light. The factory must have always been quiet on Sundays. Flour still in the air from the week, and a little residual sweetness. The walls breathing out before everyone rolled back in the morning and it started up again. Dough rolling out of a machine, laid like a garment over a woman's forearms, then cut and cut into tiny circles. Flick of a woman's wrist, gathering the circles and placing them down on a metal sheet for cooking. The steady movement as they rolled into the ovens, then out, transformed from yellow to beige. The women who iced them, the artists. The women with delicate hands, who packed them up carefully between sheaths of fluted paper. "Are you cold?" Feo asked. I said, "I'm okay." But he got up and plugged in a 3-bar electric heater in front of me. "Don't worry, I won't put that in the picture." I have no idea how much time passed. Every now and then, I snuck a look at him, wondering what was on the page, whether the movement of his hand was for my hair or my chin, my foot or the curve of my calf. He looked at my body and at the page, but occasionally our eyes met. And it was like being on the train, glancing at a stranger at the precise moment when they glanced at you. Eventually he put his pencil down, stepped back, and silently agreed with himself. Then he brought me a bathrobe so that I could stand, walk behind the easel, and see what he had done. There I was. I felt my face opening like a child who has just been given a shining coin from behind her ear. Something about the pencil lines gave dignity to my body. A photograph of me lying there, fat and pale, would be exposing, horrible, but the sketch felt private. My head tilting back, hair running over my shoulders. A line of looser flesh ran along my right outer thigh, like the white bit along the edge of a rasher of bacon. The part my mother would run a knife under and deposit into the dog bowl. "I can send you a photograph of it," he said. "Thank you," I said. "I love it." This is when I should have left. He offered me tea, which I declined, and then wine, which I did not. We sat together on the sofa I had lain on, me still naked under the bathrobe with a glass in my hand, surrounded by other women's bodies and faces. On the opposite wall, a naked woman walked away from us into a train tunnel, her spine visible, bisecting the flesh of her back. "You don't paint men?" I asked. "Not really," he said. "I'm not attracted to men. I'm not interested in men's bodies." My lips felt dry, like tomorrow they'd be cracked and wine-stained. I thought, "Touch me," and looked at him steadily until he heard. He ran his finger along my left shin bone. I let my legs fall apart. His fingers were inside my body before we kissed. When he got a condom, it wasn't from his wallet or the pocket of his coat, but from a small woven basket on a shelf of paints. He reached for it so smoothly, a gesture performed all the time. Did the women who made the biscuits get stuck in their movements, their hands jerking as they fell asleep at night, or refusing to stay still in their laps at church? Did the sugary heat of the factory make their skins itch, make them want to pull off their long skirts and release their legs, pale and naked in the flowery air, the soles of their feet shining, tough from standing all day? Afterwards, I put my head on Feo's chest, the sofa too slim for both of us, and listened to his heart under his ribs. "Did you know that would happen?" I said. I thought about it. I laughed. "Did you know?" he said. "I knew it could if I wanted it to," I said. He laughed. I said, "I knew when you offered me the wine." "Yes," he said. "I knew when you took the wine." I should have risen in this quiet moment, gone to my bag with my clothes neatly folded on top of it, slid into them and slipped out down the hallway, furtive as a mouse. It was getting late, but I didn't move. I fell asleep for a while and woke up shivering with him on the other side of the room, fully dressed and painting. He nodded at me when I sat up, and I waved sleepily, hugged my knees in and watched him for a while without speaking. He had placed money for the drawing on top of my clothes. 2 orangey £10 notes and a blue-green 5. Eventually he moved to the sink and began to clean his brushes. "So," he said, "do you have a boyfriend?" "Yes, I do actually," I said. I unhugged my knees and smiled at him. "But we sleep with other people. You always have to say this with your chin up and your face open. People so want you to secretly find it sad." "So bohemian," he said, raising his eyebrows. My chest felt hollow. I knew I was meant to ask the question back to him, but didn't want to. So I tried a statement instead, to pull a little power back. "And you have a girlfriend?" He wiped the bristles of a brush against a paper towel. "Yes." "Do you two sleep with other people?" "No," he said, still cleaning the brushes. "Well, you're not supposed to." "Right." The paint smell was strong in the room. Not chemical like house paint, but oily. A woman by the door stood staring into the distance at a petrol station, filling her car. Feo placed the brushes in a jam jar, then came and sat beside me. "Are you cold?" "Yes." "Here." He pulled a blanket from under the couch and spread it over us. "Better?" "Thanks." He put a hand on my knee. "It's a bit more complicated, actually. I have a wife." "Oh," I said. We sat silently for a while. The lamp was now directed at his easel on the other side of the room, leaving us in shadow. "So, what's the deal? Are you not attracted to her anymore, but you still love her?" "I don't love her." "Oh," I said. He shook his head and looked down. "Why are you with her?" "We have a baby," he said. A twitch at the corner of his mouth, almost like this was funny. "Oh," Then he smiled easily, widely, and it was different to all his other smiles. "She's so beautiful, my daughter." And I smiled back and asked, "Do you paint her?" "Not yet, she can't stay still." "How old is she?" "A year." I put another "oh" into the quiet space. He rose and filled a glass with water and stood drinking it by the window. "So does your boyfriend know you're here?" I said, "I'll tell him tomorrow." "He won't get jealous?" "He might." "Does he also..." Theo gestured into the silence, like it would be rude to mention sex. "Yes," I said, "he is interested in men's bodies." "God," Theo said. He came back and got under the blanket. "Do you love him?" We were talking like 10-year-old girls at a sleepover. The blanket over us, the night making us whisper, though there was no one nearby to wake with our voices. "I think so." He nodded slowly. "I am in love with someone." "What?" He gestured at the painting he'd been working on. A nurse who had tripped in a corridor, scattering a tray of sharp implements. "She's my girlfriend," he said. "She's beautiful," I said. A siren somewhere far away, foxes in the streets. "Does she know about your wife?" "She does. She does now." "Does she sleep with other people?" "No, God no, I'd get too jealous." "That's not very fair." "You're young," he said. "Life isn't as simple as you think it is." I looked at the painting of his girlfriend and imagined his wife. Something sharp about her, despite the inevitable looseness in her body, the slackening of the place that had grown his child. My face must have clouded because he said, "You're not angry?" I asked what time it was. I knew it was late, that it was cold outside, and that I lived on the other side of the city and couldn't afford a cab. But after midnight the tube would not be running. Perhaps I could find a series of night buses. I knew that would take hours. Cold would get into my muscles and bones, and I would feel exhausted and frightened. "It's 2 a.m., he said. "I'm not angry," I said. "You can sleep here if you like." "Thank you." He turned off the lamp and came to lie on the sofa with me again, pressing his body against me. He'd stripped down to his t-shirt, and I could feel the coarse hairs of his crotch against my bottom. He kissed my neck. I imagined a high, fat moon outside, a silver coin pulled from behind a child's ear. I couldn't see it, but something was throwing a scrim of light over the surfaces of the paintings. He held me tightly and whispered into my ear, "Yes, stay here. I don't want to be alone." Thank you.
I sat in on Emily Nason's class on the day she was teaching Point of View in the poem Death of the Zebras. And in the poem, the speaker is one zebra in a large group of zebras that are headed to the river for a drink. And in the river are crocodiles. The zebras are assigned numbers, and these numbers become the zebras' names, as one by one the zebras were picked off by the crocodiles. You may be asking why this has anything to do with Emily Nason's poetry, but Emily is zebra number 25. Her wild kingdom is South Carolina. Her dad shares DNA, save her partner S, her precious dog, and Johnny Cash, though a spiritual connection, of course, exists. The point of view of the speaker is an I within the we, the collective we of all of us, who worries over each of us that will get picked off by a crocodile, herself included. And her mind runs away with such worries, and these worries take wing, costumed in Emily's expansive vocabulary, steeped in her southern culture. She doesn't lose that edge or control, though. She holds it, what is precious, close to her in decorative and stopped lines. And in between point A and point B, Emily's style is akin to Willy Wonka being our tour guide of the southeastern part of the country. At Casey's Fireworks, we've got Clustering Bee, Wicked Grin, Highway to Hell, Hatfields and McCoys, the Black Cat Rockets, and there's little Emily, and in her voice, child of the Roman candle, crank open my jaw and watch the Judas's belt of a tongue twist, hear my inferno bang whump, combustible with every growing inch. In Louisville, we have white hydrangeas, honeysuckles, swamp milkweed, Taco Bell wrappers, used condoms, a baby's pacifier. 2 blocks over, a breakfast place serves cinnamon rolls the size of soccer balls. And there is a woman thrown from her car, tailbone first against the yellow curb. Before she said I could cross the road to help her, the driver came back. He pushed open the passenger door and she got in, windows down, Johnny Cash on the radio, and they were gone. And lastly, at the pumpkin patch, the 2 greened and short-stemmed, the flat-faced, unsuited for carving. And there is little Emily again, smock dress scrunched up to my knees, the newspaper comics under me, the gored flesh bleeds the pictures, imprinting cartoon smiles and speech bubbles on my freckled thighs. In Emily's poems, birds are predatory and snakes are victims. And to quote, a bird is never just a bird to me. I like that, and I liked that she gets us. And I'm rooting for number 25. And her poetry is like a glass elevator that shoots through the roof with all her loved ones inside, and we're included, and you are included. And she has been a very generous person to me, and I'd like to introduce Emily.
Thank you so much, Betsy. All I've ever wanted is to be a zebra. So that's amazing. I want to echo all of my cohort with thanks, especially to the faculty, Greg, Deborah, Lisa, Rita, Paul, Neil, for just reading my weird poems for the last 2 years. I know that's probably weighed on y'all. And also to my mom and Sean for letting me write about me, or writing about you, and also writing about me, which also means you. Sorry, I saw my mom crying and it threw me. Okay, let's do this. I thought I'd start with a firework poem because I don't think we talk about fireworks enough. Okay. No fireworks discharged within 200 feet. Casey's Fireworks, corner of Rosewood and Kilburn, South Carolina, 1999. My uncle tossing rockets into the cart I'm barely tall enough to push. Clustering bee, wicked grin. Highway to Hell, Hatfields and the McCoys, Black Cat Rockets in violet and silver. I am the kindling in the bank. Small girl with a soul of smoke bomb, child of the Roman candle. Crank open my jaw and watch my Judas's belt of a tongue twist. Hear my inferno bang whump. Combustible with every growing inch. My uncle, cigar in mouth, leaning forward to light 2 sparklers at a time. Spell your name, little comrade. Cursive in the sky, burning paper in the sky, my name disappearing in the sky. He lets me light the first bottle rocket of the night. We run fast when one goes rogue. Bulky flashlight held up shaking to his sooty face. Good, you've still got both your eyes. Bang snaps, throwdowns, poppets, party snappers, poppies. Sunflowers twirling, my job to kick them away from the grass. Dance, girl, dance. 4th of July, New Year's Eve, my birthday, Vanna White's birthday, anybody's birthday. We filled the sky with light. I pump gas in Manning next to Hobo Joe's Firework Emporium. Fireworks, 30% free. Buy one, get one free. Make enough noise to raise the dead. Firecracker roll, tell me how many sparks I have left in me. Tell me how many more years I'll spend chasing the bottle rockets crack, crack, crack. I've got the blood to burn this all down. So I wanted to write a sonnet that had Hulk Hogan in it. And it turned into a poem series. Not all of them have Hulk Hogan in them. They should, but so this is the first. I'm gonna read 2 of those. And the only thing you need to know is that sertraline is a really pretty medical name for Zoloft. How can you not name a poem that? This is the Hulk Hogan one. Sertraline. In the yard, I scoop mucus-cocooned shit, dark crocus veined. I prod my dog's abdomen, feeling for obstruction, pain. Nothing risen yet, so we continue catch and release. Up, up, toss. She leaps, falls feathered belly first into a pile of fur limbs. I'm listening to a podcast about Terry Bollea's sex tape. It makes me want to visit Florida. Someone needs to save the manatees, but it won't be me. Seasickness, you know, brain that doesn't trust. So I stay on land, throw. The dog returns, dolloped with green, dotted with sap. Trot, trot, trot. Reminds me of Giuseppe, the Russian pocket pig I sometimes watch running circles in a Moscow kitchen. Serkov means church, not circle. Yes, a brain that wanders, I said when the nurse asked about lingering side effects. Hopelessness? Only when the dog loses the ball, meets my wine with her own. Sertraline. I am predisposed, toothed gardenia, just like my mother's mother. I ask the doctor what to do. She says, consult the oracles, read the tea leaves, which means keep taking your meds, which means watch who you procreate with. I'm not sure I'm happier now. I just feel things less. Not quite a numbness, but a lack. When my dog sees a dog that looks like her, she cocks her head as if to say, huh. Isn't that something? Smart girl, but it frightens me that she knows, retains what she looks like. I am frightened by a lot of things, but not of what awaits. Side effects, a comfort, ideation with fresh dirt, ashes. Visiting the family burial plot, the caretaker tells us we can stack them 6 deep. Economical, I think. My mother asks him to trim the nearby tree. It's obscuring her mother's grave. 2 rows down, a marble headstone reads, "Stand back, I'm coming up." Okay, where are you going to go? This next poem is based off the Netflix series The Staircase. If anyone has seen that. It's a true crime show. It has an epigraph that'll help. I watch a documentary on owl theory and become convinced that everyone I love will be killed by a bird. Owl theory. Hypothesis that Kathleen Peterson was not murdered by being pushed down a flight of stairs, but was instead attacked by an owl. My therapist tells me to stop searching for bad news. That's not reality. She recites a story about her father's funeral, open casket in December, some loose songbird in the chapel. It was just a bird, Emily. Bullshit. My brain is mean, and a bird is never just a bird to me. In Ohio, I met a falcon named Ace. He liked Burger King French fries and could fuck you up. Stay 5 feet back. He's got a hell of a reach. I helped the handler carry his kennel back to the car. He screamed the whole way. How birds mourn a fallen comrade, screaming in circles. Good grief. I too pull my wings out, spend all night crying over S and Helena, convinced they both will be murdered by an owl. These things happen, mostly in Maine, but that's still in this world. And these two friends of mine enjoy the underbelly of the moon. I tell Helena they're so quiet you won't hear them swooping. She says, "Don't cry, Mom." I tell S I'll avenge his death by killing every raptor in town with my hands. And he says, "That won't be necessary, but thanks." So what if the bird is just a bird? What if the woman in the documentary just fell down the stairs instead? I'd still circle their heads, their crowns with salt. Palm to temple, ritualized wailing. A little like how I returned to my father, Saturday trips to the zoo, farm animal exhibit, goat shit on my white sneakers, damp hay and kettle corn. My father taps my shoulder and points up toward the barn ceiling. There in the rafters, 2 barred owls behind glass asleep. My father cups the nape of my neck with his sweaty palm. One of the owls wakes, spreads his wings, and for a moment there is limitless. And my last poem is a little love poem. And the title is based off the second position in ballet, which I know because I've just started taking bar class, which is now in all my poems. So thank y'all. And then we get to do intermission. So second position. For the first year, I couldn't sleep next to him. Too intimate, liminal even. Plus, he snored. Plus, I didn't want to get used to it. I just stayed awake, a little apart, feeling the tide of him rising, receding. Today, in bar class, I have to stop pausing for water. Out of shape, too many carbs, trips to Chick-fil-A. They have a new seasonal item, the frosted key lime dream. It makes me feel tropical, fancy, at sea. The women on either side of me are waifs, sniffs of girls. No judgment. I used to look like that too. I open my arms as the instructor tells us to push out, out, out. I am told to imagine someone squeezing me, to resist them. Everything here is tinged with a sort of violence. We tuck and throw while elastic bands, bras, always constrain. Never enough room, so I have to watch to make sure I don't hit my neighbor when my arms outstretch. Sometimes, when S comes through the door, his arms are already open for me. 9 times out of 10, I go to him, mirror the gesture. The other time, I wait for him to come to me, and eventually, the weight of him quiets me. Thank y'all.
So we have some refreshments. I wish I could say, like Anna said, some wine for you. We do have some later. But for now, some other kinds of refreshments in the back. And we'll just do that for 10 minutes or so, and then we'll come back and start again. Wonderful. Okay, introducer of Katie, might want to come forward.
back. Does that sound okay? My name is Susie Eckel, and this afternoon it is my pleasure to introduce Katie Bryce. For the past 2 days, I have been crushing Katie's thesis, nights and weekends. And as with everything she writes, Katie has crafted this novel with warmth and wit and incredible self-assuredness. She welcomes us into a world in which two best friends call out Marco Polo to one another in their shoebox Brooklyn apartment, where even the dust hangs in the air like little bits of star. In Katie's New York City, a regular old morning might turn into a light of God, big ball kind of sun, a light of God, big ball of sun kind of day, and foggy shot glasses pulled from the freezer become 2 cold breaths in a man's hand. I so admire Katie's ability to take the mundane and transform it into something worthy of attention. When I read her work, I am reminded that I should be awed every day simply by being alive and by encountering this strange world that we live in. I am reminded also of just what it was like to navigate the exciting yet perilous decade just after college, when you make a few right decisions and a whole lot of wrong ones. But here's another thing about Katie's work. Right and wrong are not words that belong in a conversation about it. While her characters are so often concerned with morality and, dare I say, Catholic guilt, they rarely pass judgment on others or on themselves. When I read her work, I too am freed from the burden of my own judgment. I feel good and loose and, to use one of her words, glimmery, as I walk alongside her characters. I think my glimmery openness is a testament to the power of Katie's prose and how it beckons us wonderfully in. Her work is rhythmic, at times incantatory, and often deeply funny. Her conversational tone is deceptively plain, but contains so much heart, and sometimes I have to stop to read one of her sentences again and again to try to answer the question, how did she do that? The words she strings together are so much more than they ought to be. And that's the kind of magic I admire most in her work, which she will share with us today. Everyone, please welcome Katie Bryce.
Thank you so much, Susie. Is this okay? Can you hear me? Yeah. So I'd also like to briefly thank Barbara and Jeb and Lisa for all that they do. My professors, especially Jane, who guided me through this thesis, my cohort, who I've learned so much from, and everyone outside of the program who supported me through this, whether that's been 2 or 27 full years. So I'm going to read an excerpt from my novel, Nights and Weekends, that Susie was talking about. All you need to know in this scene is that Brenda, our narrator, has been called to the hospital by John, her sometimes lover, who lives in Oakland but is back in New York unexpectedly. At the sign-in desk, I was listed as John's wife. I didn't correct the mistake. The nurse checked me in on her presswood clipboard and handed me a visitor sticker. Wear this the whole time you're here, she said. She led me through a white hallway, through 2 automatic doors, until we arrived just outside his room. His rib went through his lung, just punctured a little hole. You wouldn't be able to see it without a microscope, but it's going to make it hard for him to breathe. He only slightly fractured the rib, which is lucky, but his torso still needs support. He's on some drugs for the pain. She paused. So you'll be prepared. John was lying there in a white bed, his thin hair licked down from the flat hospital pillows. I didn't like the way his eyes looked. They were all sunken and dark, the golden column of light eaten up by the pain he was feeling, the mystical stolen away from him in this medicinal room. Hello, he said. I wanted to lean over and ask him how he got here. Here, meaning to this hospital in this moment, but really here, meaning to this place in his life, where he needed to call on a person as lost as I was to come rescue him. Instead, I said, hello. It felt as though there should be soft jazz playing in the background, me caring for a hurt soldier in the hospital. Oh, nurse, I think I'm in love with you. What happened to you? I said. I didn't even know you were in town. I don't totally remember. I was out on the Williamsburg Bridge. I remember seeing people walking toward me. This is the only hospital I know the name of in New York. Doesn't totally fit together. I don't know. I was drunk. He reached out a hand to me. His arm seemed heavy and hard to move. It was stuck with needles connected to IVs of Vicodin and fluids hanging above him. I'm sorry, he said. I wasn't sure which part he was apologizing for. He tilted his hand down and some of his blood rushed out and mixed with whatever was coming from the drip. I reached out and took his hand even though it made me a little queasy. I'm sorry, he said again. Is there anyone else you want me to call? Another friend or something? What, do you have somewhere to be? Like I hadn't just come from somewhere. No, I just thought maybe you'd want Brandon here, I said. Brandon, who loved karaoke and on whose couch John stayed when he was in town. I only want you, he said. He felt very far away. You listed me as your wife? I had to. They'd only let family in here. I don't have a ring on, I said, as if that was the thing that mattered. I thought of the ring I'd wanted to give him, looked again at his skinny fingers, his thin hair, thought it probably wouldn't have even fit you. It doesn't matter, he said. Maybe they think we're the type of couple who doesn't wear rings. I gave them your real last name. We're progressive. I felt one sticky edge of my green and white visitor name tag begin to peel up. A few pieces of my hair caught on it. I'd slapped it right over my heart. They'd identified me here as family to the wounded, my hair, my shirt fastened to the idea. In sickness and in health, I do. Look, he said, and pointed at the band around his wrist. I have no name. It says John Doe. They couldn't understand me clearly when I first got here, and they haven't fixed it. I'm nameless, perfectly anonymous. His eyes lit up. To be no one, to be nothing in a sea of nothing. What a thought. I couldn't ever fully slip away. Respectable mothers like Carol could track me down if I tried to wriggle too far out to sea. I liked the idea of myself as an eel off the coast of Rockaway, slippery and fast. Angelfish died, I said. I spoke into the scar above his left eye. What? What do you mean? The fish we bought together. She finally got caught by that old fishing rod in the sky. Oh, yeah, her, he said. He could forget because he did not have to buy fish food. There was no tank with water running loudly through its filter in his bedroom that he had to clean. She got all old and raggedy. She died because she missed you. R.I.P., he said. We should pour one out for her. I didn't want to drink. I just wanted him to remember and care. Our baby died. Angelfish isn't really dead, I said. John started laughing. What are you doing, playing a trick on me or something? I don't know. I just thought you might be sad if Angelfish had died. I thought I might see you sad. John kept laughing. I'm sad all the time. I mean, I can hardly fucking breathe because I got mugged on the Williamsburg Bridge. Why do you think my life is so fun? I called you here because I knew none of my deadbeat friends would come get me. So I'm, what? The girl who keeps your fish you don't remember buying from dying and takes you home when your rib pops through your lungs? It's not like that, he said. I don't want it to be like that. Those are two different things, I said. It was quiet after that, and I stood dumbly by the bed, feeling like I was at a family Christmas party with nothing to do. But I was still holding his hand and could feel the IV. I wanted to press down as hard as I could until it put pressure on his veins in his hand, and they popped. I wanted to feel the blood wetly on top of his metacarpal bones and under that thin layer of skin. I wanted to be part of the things that were ruining him. Jeopardy was on the TV in front of us, and John motioned for me to get on the bed, so I took off my shoes and lay next to him. These large masses contain the majority of the world's fresh water, read the closed captioning. Do you know the answer, he asked me. I'll guess lakes, even though that seems wrong. It's glaciers, he said. What is glaciers, read the TV. Of course, most of the fresh water would be in glaciers, locked up, inaccessible until it melts and overtakes the world. Everything we need is right there, iced over and waiting to destroy us. I looked at John. How did you know that, I asked. a summer in Alaska, I worked on a camp there, he said, all of these parts of him that I didn't know. He breathed in and winced. God, being in pain like this reminds me of when I was little. I used to get these growing pains that were so overwhelming they'd last all day and into the night. When I'd finally get to sleep, I had dreams that the pain had turned into black sludge and I could cry it out. It came down my face, thick black tears, and it would make me so happy. Usually those mornings I woke up, my body had stopped hurting, though that wasn't always the case. An image arrived in my mind of the ceramic doll face of Mary with red tears of blood running down it. You dreamed yourself a visitation, I said. What? Like Mary and all of those statues. You must know about those statues. Aren't all of those always found to be fake, he said. Sure, they're fake, but isn't that even more interesting? Someone crying into a vial and then dyeing it red so they can sneak into a church and drip it onto a doll's face and then come in through the front, cross themselves, and begin to weep their tears again about how it's all a miracle. More interesting, but also depressing and stupid, John said. I think they're just trying to manufacture being touched by something sacred. I don't know if that's an altogether bad thing. That's not something you create, though, John said. People can't make the sacred, we can only make all of the bad things. You have to discover the good things. I stayed with John the whole night, sleeping like a straight arrow next to him, not wanting to disrupt the IV, the bandage, not wanting the nurse to kick me out. In the morning, she came to let John free. He acted like that, like he was springing the clink. He got up to put on his pants, his chicken legs sticking out of his hospital gown, the big bandage wrapped around his middle, stayed on one side with metal butterflies. He looked so skinny with that thing wrapped tight around him. I wanted to give him some of my padding, the part that's silvered with stretch marks around my hips. He needed it more than I did. His body so taut that his ribs pierced right into the organs they were protecting. We went outside. He got to ride in a wheelchair to the curb. He insisted on waving his own hand out for the taxi, his John Doe hospital band flapping in the wind. Greenpoint Avenue, John said triumphantly to the driver. That's where I live, I said. I know, I thought that's where we were going. You're my wife. I want to see angelfish. Now you care about angelfish, I said. I knew he wanted to sleep on a bed, not Brandon's couch. Oh, nurse, another glass of water. The drive home was long, and we didn't talk very much. At a stoplight halfway through the journey, John leaned his head on me. For that moment, stopped and held in place by his body, the city, which had been speeding by us in a gray blur, clarified back into something I could see. We were in Queens, looking at a man sitting outside of a bodega on a dirty lawn chair. Next to him was a sign advertising girls, girls, girls. Past them, I could see the antiseptic skyscrapers of Manhattan. We had not even arrived home, but already I imagined him leaving, getting out of my bed and flying across the country, kiss on the forehead at the door. Oh, nurse, what angelfish? Oh, nurse, I don't remember you ever caring for me before. Oh, nurse, I didn't ask for your best, you just gave it to me. Oh, nurse, I'm feeling better, I must go.
Where's Caleb? Hi, I'm Michelle. When I knew that I would be introducing Caleb, I was very excited. I have tried, and sometimes failed, to keep my fandom of Caleb's poetry a secret, to play it cool, like Caleb. And if I know one thing about Caleb and his poems, it is that they show unbelievable restraint, unlike any poet I've read before. In his thesis, Open Water, the speaker grieves 3 friends who have died since high school, mixing the landscapes of adolescence, gas station parking lots, old bedrooms, the wall of vending machines, with allusions to biblical stories and saints, holy gardens, monasteries, the dark hour of prayer. The speaker's high school years become a private mythology of post-Columbine America. Something extraordinary to notice when Caleb reads tonight is how seldom his poems use figurative language. Instead, he makes his poems speak openly, plainly, which demands extreme precision and receptiveness. And by choosing so carefully and intentionally to reveal only the things sitting directly at the core, his poems sting with incredible force. Like this line, "I didn't say anything about Bobby. I wanted his death to be his, not some story folded into my life." And this unforgettable line, "Blessed are the meek, the peacemakers, the persecuted righteous. Theirs is the kingdom. Let them enter it unburdened. But what will you do, my friends?" To his friends, Caleb pays attention, which I believe is one of the most authentic forms of tenderness. And I'm not just speaking of his poetry. Caleb shows this care all of the time. Like a trusted mechanic, if my poem wobbles, he finds the defective word or the misplaced line that was the underlying problem all along. He's full of solutions that can only be found if you're paying really, really close attention. And like his poems, Caleb is not one to overshare emotion. But Caleb, I'm sorry to say that you have nonetheless revealed your tremendous kindness, generosity, and warmth. We're all so excited to hear you read tonight. Please join me in welcoming Caleb.
Thank you so much. Everyone can hear me fine. I brought my water bottle because I need a prop at times to distract myself from reading my poems. So I'm going to just thank everyone quickly, of the faculty, of course, who I've gotten to take classes with everyone. So Lisa and Greg and Deborah and Paul and Rita and Neil as well, who read some poems of mine, and then Barbara and Jeb, all my peers in workshop. My mom and brother, who are both here and have never read any of these poems, so we're just all doing it together. And Autumn, my girlfriend, who is here as well. Thank you all for coming. So I just decided I was going to do like a tour of my work. So I'm going to start with the first poem that I ever turned into workshop. It used to have a very esoteric title, and it is now titled, "In the Hour Before Birth, the Soul Chooses a Life." So we'll start here and just go on. All bodies might be beautiful, but I don't care. Only strength satisfies, to be unmoved but move. Besides, even if I let myself be seen, what would I attract but bees and weaker animals seeking shelter? No. If I must participate, at least let me be the bee, or let me be a mole living underneath, with furred skin grown over my eyes, and that wild star-nosed snout, always feeling for worms and mollusks, and anything that might fit in my mouth. I could be happy then, tunnels would echo with my song. But the law says nothing of happiness. It commands us to love. And then this poem is both about my brother and for my brother. It's called, sorry, I'm going to drink my water now. It's called Epistle Abel, and it has an epigraph which is, "The Lord looked with favor upon Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. Every few years my father would call and ask to speak to me. I'd take the phone to my room, listen to his news, what state he lived in with his current wife and children, how he managed to make the money he didn't send. I wasn't angry with the receiver pressed against my ear, only afraid I'd say something that would make him not like me. I kept quiet. Still, it was always an hour or more before he'd sigh and say he guessed he should probably talk to my brother. Did we say we loved each other when we said goodbye? I can't answer that. My brother was always downstairs in the kitchen waiting. They'd only talk for 10 minutes before my father would say he had to go. Oh, Abel, what could you have said to Cain out in those fields? My mouth opens and closes, silent and stupid as a fish. And then this poem, so as Michelle was saying, I wrote, I have a couple friends who died after high school, and so I wrote some poems about that. So this one's called Black Friday. My mom is in it also, very briefly. I drove to my mom's the day after Thanksgiving for a makeup meal. My brother and his girlfriend were late. On the basement computer, I searched Bobby's name, I can't tell you why, and found that 5 months earlier he'd died. I read gunshot wound, went upstairs, put on my coat, and walked across the street, through the field, past the drainage pond, to the house where he lived when we were kids. Strangers there now, but no car in the driveway. I went right up, looked through all the windows, saw nothing I could do. Whatever the world became when he left, I didn't notice. I walked back through the field. I put the crescent rolls in, microwaved the green beans. At the table, my brother held his girlfriend's hand. He said they were going to get married. My mom cried. I didn't say anything about Bobby. Not when I got back to school and saw my new friends. Not even when I went to bed with a woman who loved me. I wanted his death to be his, not some story folded into my life. I wanted to clear a space in my body as if he could live in it, as if he could be kept safe. This poem's called Late Vigil. I have read that early monasteries, knowing the importance of communal prayer, entrusted one monk to keep watch all night and wake the other brothers to sing the psalms before dawn. And I admit that once I thought this the perfect image of me, only I descend to my brother's rooms and find the beds long empty, with no way to tell whether I've been abandoned or fell asleep and dreamed of returning stars. But truthfully, no one gave me this task. It has been useless for 1,000 years. 2 more. This poem's called Open Water. Someone posts on Bobby's Facebook memorial that Mike has died. I search and find it's true. In lieu of flowers, the funeral notice reads, donations may be made in his name to local mental health and addiction services. I find a picture of him with a woman and 2 children, then the website of the company where he sold pressure washers. In a 10-minute video, he explains pros and cons of various models. He has the same buzz cut, the same easy smile. He's still beautiful if you're willing to be forgiving. I exit the screen. I don't want to think of things differently. In 8th grade, I used to dream about him. We'd lie in bed together but didn't touch, and both of us wore our clothes. Of course I never told him. He was kind but shared my cruelty. Who could explain where it came from? I switch the lights off, go to bed, and don't dream anything. Before sunrise, I drive to a lake in New Jersey. I'm training for a triathlon. I need to practice swimming in open water. When I arrive, others are already sliding through the surface. I pull my wetsuit on, tight new skin, and go down to meet them. The grass weeps all over my feet. Thank you all for listening so quietly and generously. I have one more poem to read. It's called Reunion. When I wake, I'm in 9th grade again, in the bare, bleak hour before school. It must be winter. Outside my window, the fields fill with gray-blue light. I dress slowly, tuck a pack of Marlboros in my sock to smuggle past my mother, and run the teeth of a handsaw across my throat. I push and pull until my head comes off. It happens so easily. No vertebrae resist. No heart makes a messy spray. My head doesn't weigh anything. I carry it to school in the crook of my arm and walk straight to our circle near the vending machines. Everyone's there, Pat and Andy and Chris and Sean, even Mike and Bobby. Everyone turns to look me over. Mike asks how I managed not to die. I say I never will as long as no one tears off my eyelids. They all nod quietly, and then Bobby reaches for my face. Thank you all so much.
Here to introduce my friend Juan. My name's Justin, by the way. The first time I saw him, I remember feeling simultaneously revulsion, indeed an almost moralist revulsion, and yet also the sting of an unmistakable sexual feeling, such as, to my awareness, another male had seldom, if ever, provoked in me. But it was not attraction exactly. It was not a pull toward a body. It was rather like an unpleasant encounter with sex itself, or at least the underside of sex. This is how Juan Suarez introduces us to the titular character of his novel. Soblero. This mysterious figure is a typically Juan creation, at once repellent and darkly appealing, a figure whose pathologies and predilections reveals more about the human condition than most of us would prefer to admit. In just the year that he and I have been working and reading together, Juan has introduced our workshop to, among other such figures, a woman who raises a boy as though he were a dog, a visionary medicine woman singing in the depths of the Ecuadorian jungle, as well as to the poor souls tasked with breaking up the solid masses of human detritus that obstruct our sewers. So thanks, Juan. Juan's aesthetic may skew toward the seedy, the transgressive, and the absurd, but like Juan himself, it's also full of deeply humane passion for the natural world and for the people that polite society rarely deigns to look at, let alone contemplate in art. On its surface, Juan's fiction bears only the most passing resemblance to most of the major currents of Western literature over the past 1,000 or so years. That, I believe, is intentional. Hearing Juan read his work in his slow, incantatory Ecuadorian baritone is like hearing some renegade priest read from a long-suppressed pagan gospel. The world Juan conjures with his fiction is not a world any right-thinking person should choose to live in, and yet it is the world we live in, if only we were brave enough to look. We should be grateful for writers like Juan who are. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to my friend.
That was amazing. You actually did surprise me. I didn't think you would. All right, so not everybody knows this, but nobody who knows me will be surprised by it. But when I applied to this program, I left out a key piece of my application, which should have meant that I wouldn't even have gotten read. And about 2 days afterwards, I get an email from one Barbara Moriarty saying, you know, they shouldn't be reading you right now, but they are because of a small act of bureaucratic kindness that assured that my papers actually went through, even though they were missing a key step. So, first of all, I want to thank Barbara for the insane gift. I mean it. Next, Micheline, thank you so much. Not only have you been an amazing advisor, but also your literature is a gift. I continue to be in awe of it, as I was since I read it first semester. So thank you. Thank you also to Chris and Jane, the rest of my committee, and all the professors and people here. Nobody actually deserves to be in this kind of program. It's great. The very special shout out to my grandparents who are here. Son increíbles, son inspiración. Un montón de las historias que ustedes me contaron se volvieron esta novela, así que gracias por estar y Gavita. And lastly, thank you to my parents. I owe you everything. Thank you for never giving up on me and always being there. So I struggled to find like a self-contained part of my novel. So I don't know if this is good or not, but all you need to know is right now the protagonist who's gone back to live to this town that his grandparents came from originally has set up a meeting in a bar to meet with the character that we just heard Justin describe for some sketchy business, and this is him waiting in a bar. So named after the blades affixed to the legs of fighting roosters with which they tore themselves and each other to shreds, the Espuela de Gallo had a certain grimy appeal to it. Hanging off the eastern side of Maraus, the bar, which had evidently been built as an add-on to the original house, protruded like a tumor from its walls and dangled over the incline, which was so steep at that point that there were no stairs connecting one level to the next, just a wall and the solitary concrete stilt which held the room up. The clientele of Espuela de Gallo, in turn, consisted of precisely the demographic Rocio referred to with the phrase gentuza del campo, that is, people more towards the Indian side of a mestizaje gradient, whose families had moved to Maraus from the surrounding countryside within the last generation or two, and its existence in the midst of clean wooden Maraus struck the same discordant and, to my eyes, completing note that they did. A balancing of forces. Little more than a dampened plywood box with a concrete floor, the place was dirty, too bizarre to be exactly ugly, and of course, like all establishments of its kind throughout the whole country, its walls were decorated with the iconic Pilsener beer calendars from years ago, big, faded tits all around. The barman may or may not have been mute. And when the sighted man, this Sofronio Alcázar, appeared, what did I imagine? Another degenerated colonial son like myself, like my ancestors, like the quaint old people that had converged upon me like flies from the moment I set foot in this town? In any case, when he did appear, I was drifting slowly through a tunnel of music and mild, recreational melancholy. You see, the music in places like this one necessarily had to belong to one of a few categories. Either it was purely old-school reggaeton day in and day out, or else they might play the typical salsas and merengues, the same goddamn 10 songs that were the substance of every wedding or 15-year party, common across all social classes, Joy Arroyo and the like. Or they might, as happened to be the case here, play that specific sort of archaic, syrupy Latin American pop, which I'm not sure I can even describe, but which you know instantly when you hear it. Una cierta estirpe. A certain list of names and faces lost in time that were the same names and faces that accompanied the half-naked chicas Pilsener on the walls. Names like Leodan, Sandro, Roberto Carlos, and of course, Jean Soap. Jean Soap. It was my friend Paula on a long drive to the beach who introduced me to the immortal genius of Jean Soap for the first time. Discovering that the auxiliary cable of her car was broken, We had stopped at a gas station to buy stacks of pirated CDs from a salesman who had positioned himself at this Terpel station right on the Pan American Highway as it exited Quito, precisely for the purpose of providing people like us with music on their way to the coast. Every disc on his menu, but an iteration of one of the 3 or 4 typical mixtapes of which every Ecuadorian had memorized a version, with slight variations. The Rock de los 80 CD, the Rock en Español CD, the Boleros mixtape, and the Rocoleras, on which Gene Sub was almost certainly to be found and which probably had a fair overlap with Escuela de Gallos playlist. However, on this occasion, Paula had suddenly jumped as she flipped through the plastic pages with her pockets of CDs, squealing, "This one, no matter what else we're taking, this one has to be there," and wrenching free an item whose cover made me give her a skeptical face. The music dealer looked at Paula, whom he had evidently underestimated, and nodded with the sage approval of one who knows. The cover showed an Asian man with mushroomy hair making flashy pistol gestures with his hands and wearing a screaming pink shirt in front of an also screaming pink background. Now, what is this? Fucking Gene Soap. Uh-huh. You don't know Gene Soap, she said? Salesman clicked his tongue. Listen, I don't care if you want to listen to it or not, but I'm getting this for Andres. He's a huge fan and it's so hard to find his albums. Nah. Can't find any of them anymore, agreed the seller. Bao shook her head. People are fucking grateful. In these stops, it was tradition to buy some 10 collections because one knew that only about half of the CDs would actually work. But on this occasion, the harvest turned out to be particularly sterile, and of those 10, only 4 turned out to be operational, of which one was Gene Sub, one, labeled as Simon & Garfunkel, was not in fact Simon & Garfunkel, but instrumental covers of Simon & Garfunkel songs in traditional flutes and Andean instruments. For some inexplicable reason, the preferred muzak at every tourist spot where the owners wanted to make foreigners feel at home but also flaunt their ecuatorianidad, and both enterprises to which that miserable choice of music was poison. Indeed, I had not wanted to listen to whatever kind of sounds were produced by the man in the pink shirt, and yet after 2 laps around that Boney M-choked 80s rock collection, and also 2 around Grandes Éxitos de Soda Stereo, when a 3rd spin threatened to take on nightmarish tones, I acquiesced to putting on the Gene Soap. Now, words cannot really follow into the territory of music. The point is, Andres never received the CD Bao bought for him. She and I burned it until it glitched all the way to the beach and back. Now, the glittering stage of some ignominious eatery turned concert hall in Machala. A baby blue curtain hung up behind the stage where there are no instruments, just a solitary mic, and Gene Soap approaches. ¿Qué tal, Machala? They go insane. You think that maybe amid the cheers you can hear people orgasming in the background. The recorded instrumental track begins to play, and Gene Soap, stiff, inexpressive, face immobilized from the cocaine, makes it rain like it was a fucking joke. And who were you really, Gene Soap? Who's this man who would die at 53, burnt out from conquering the popular stages of lower-class Ecuador for 2 decades? Whose songs were recorded in the 70s and 80s, but sounded like they had come out of some forgotten corner in the origins of rock and roll, lush with cheesy surf guitars and obscene brass arrangements? Who was this adopted son, who everybody assumed was Chinese, but was in fact Korean North American, the signature accent that gave his records their distinctive sound, not an Asian accent at all, but just the nasalizations and pirate R's of a North American, un gringuito cualquiera? His parents, diplomats or something, had brought him to Quito as a child, where he'd gone to an upscale school that fostered his English more than his Spanish, and so he never lost his accent. But when the parents left again towards the end of his teenage years, he chose to stay behind. And why? What place could a young Asian man have found in the Ecuador of the 70s, when he would have been a rarer sight than a Bengal tiger, which at least might have made its sad way through some circus, and not a welcome one either? The deck should have been stacked against him. If anything, he should have been hated. It was, after all, a time when it was not taboo for people to remark, as my grandfather was known to cheerily do to the panic of the entire family, "Haz patria, mata un chino." And yet, whatever it had for him, Gene Soap fell in love with his country, this last little retazo of the Gran Colombia, and the country fell in love with him. And not The country that his parents had introduced him to, the country that his school had belonged to, and the one to which he, the respectable son of an American diplomat, should have belonged. No, not for you, Jinso. To you, the stages of Quevedo, Babahoyo, Ambato. To you, Puerto Viejo, Rock City, and Milagro, the yellow-eyed Guasmo, and the hells of Lago Agrio. You conquered them all. A melodramatic voice, an almost robotic body, a gentleness, even when he was coked out of his mind. This lost soul, alien in every way and yet more native than the last of them. And so in Mi Espuela de Gallo, I noticed the Jinso poster next to a Colombian-looking mulatta in a thong, and from the instant I saw it, awaited the inevitable moment when his music would come on, which it did almost immediately. Ven chiquilla ven, and a deep and cheesy blues settled into my soul. Squeals of yellow brass, as though from an old western, flame out to either side of Jinso's black and fuchsia voice. I perceive the static of an old television screen, a car crash, a glove. Aggrandized but unironic nostalgia, emotions so pure and over the top they can never exist except in a song like this one, and out of this glorious kitsch explosion, the occasion marked with a precision that only a soundtrack can give to reality. The door of the bar swung open, and through it came the man I had come to meet, who, immediately recognizing me as the odd one out amid the clientele, walked up to my table and offered his hand for me to shake. Marlon, Sofronio, pa servirle. Thank you.
Hi everybody, can everybody hear me? Louder? Okay. I've never talked into a microphone, so scary. When you meet certain people or encounter certain pieces of art, you realize, as Rilke once said, you must change your life. Amy Sue is one of these people, and her art is this brand of art. Scintillating and cosmic, unabashedly corporeal and visceral, Amy's work juggles the spiritual and the physical, high and low diction, the mythic and the mundane, with such earnest attention and conviction. She reminds us every time that these are not opposing forces. Rather, they are part of a complex web of symbiotic relationships that spans this life, this place, and all that lies beyond us, all that is divine. Fiercely tender and always feral, Amy's poetry has the strength and the empathy to look with equal attention on the magnitude of mountains and familial ties, and the brilliant minutiae of a beloved's freckle, the filigreed shadow a flower casts. Grappling always with that space between brevity and eternity, where this lifetime flickers fervently, Amy fearlessly brings us deep into the wilds of her heart and leaves us there, throws colors against the walls of our imagination we never knew existed. There are images she renders that will stay with me forever. I'm thinking of one from the first poem of Amy's I ever read in a workshop. She writes, "I caught your love like a ricochet bullet, just when I thought I was safe, pouting violently like the bad boyfriends in movies, regretful and spoiled, but without even ambition enough to show up at your new Valentine's house, all leather jacket and switchblade. What can I say? I changed my life." Please welcome Amy.
I'm so beautiful. I want to thank the program infinitely, Lisa, my advisor especially, but everyone, Greg, Deborah, Rita, Barbara, Jeb. I feel so lucky to have been given this chance. I want to thank my friends who have brought me back from the dead over and over. They know who they are. I want to thank my boyfriend Gabriel because I don't know what I would write about if you weren't so dreamy. I want to thank my siblings because without your ferocious love, I really don't know where I'd be. And finally, I want to thank my mom who raised us selflessly on her own. Family portrait with Cadillac engulfed in flames. My mother lost track of the time, playing in the kingdom of tall grass with me, light passing incandescent through that swaying, frothing wheat. On the ride home, she flipped the tape over, sang Nights in White Satin, a mourning dove cooing as she carried me up to bed. Days when we would cheer if the car started. Women in the movies were always cold, angelic collarbones begging you to drape your leather jacket around them. Love was a china doll my father tied with string and let drag from the trunk of his car as he went, let dangle from the wing of a plane. So I should have known better. But in my heart, I already had a leather jacket I'd give anyone. In all my memories, he coughs blood into tissues and shoves them deep in his pockets, looks at me knowing we wouldn't know each other. Behind him, a Cadillac engulfed in flames. At 13, my brother was already an addict, robbing gas stations to buy cocaine. Picture him, black bandana tied over a face without stubble. To think I was kicking him on the couch in my footsie pajamas. My sister cast in frigid diamond every few seconds by the strobe light. Crystal embedded in her tongue that she used to charm cobras. The word love carved into her arm with a box cutter. And while the gods locked them in the garage and broke hockey sticks over their shoulders, I was inside talking to windowsill ladybugs. Brother who snuck in to slip cash in my mother's purse after he was kicked out. Bought a new car, torched the old one, and rolled it into the canyon. We don't sell for parts, he said. He said if I'd my own holiday, we'd drag undercovers out of their houses and burn them at the stake, because who could make a career of betrayal? Grandmother, my heathen saint, smoking Virginia Slims in a stained robe in the sacred alcove of TV light. It's over now, and no one will have ever seen you weep. I like to laugh at the families in white button-ups and blue jeans, kneeling in the reeds where a frail dune fence trails off. They smile uneasily for the camera, everyone bracing against the roar, everyone holding each other in vain. I know lovers are supposed to become family, but my mother's love is a hard act to follow. Who could ever be so desperate for me, so absolute? She was either twisting us daisy-chain crowns in the baseball field, in the dew, in the morning light, kissing all of our names, or she was standing over your bed in the night, floor a volcanic spill of candles, trying to cast a demon out of your body that you were born with, that's never left. What a pussy, my brothers say of pampered Paris in a Hollywood remake of the mythic history. We watch him fall stupidly through a gnashing battlefield, prince favored unjustly by the gods, as brave men are shredded around him. Like me, passing through my youth somehow unscathed. And now I come to you, reader, coward soldier, youngest sibling, baby of the royal chaos, last to rush from the trench and furthest from the front lines. I heard the magenta carnage of living and almost didn't come at all, nearly backed away into the ether. Coward soldier delivered home, hung with medals, here to tell the story as best I can, because who will if I don't? The warning. I thought I heard someone yelling outside the night we first tongue-kissed in the attic, but was distracted by how he pulled his t-shirt over his head, the impossible shape he took. Deep grooves of his ribs like a Victorian birdcage or loom. Shock of those sightless eyes of the male chest. Dogwood shoulders, shoulders like bridges of glass. The hair of his skinny body an overlay of black eyelet lace. Such spare silk stitches. The moon blushed and fell through the skylight, and something was said to cover my awe as we passed paint-stripping Jim between us. and in the silences I blessed the juniper berries, the trees that gave themselves for those creaking floorboards, prayed reverently to the dust-cloaked objects stored around us, lamps with bare bulbs, dressers beneath sheets, sparkle of the bottle so white in that dark, every cell of my body awake and vibrating. I looked at him and knew no one had ever wanted to be just his friend. Tattered skateboarding shoes, his ears Pythagorean cartilage and gold stud, teeth like a destroyed piano. His abdomen strategy of muscles visible for his frailty, the way the first time you see your ruin, it might look like salvation. I was a monster covered in eyes to take him in, and he looked like a court statue, like Cheltenham High's Holy of Holies, like summer vacation. The cicadas that were larvae when I was born came crawling out of the ground screaming that year, their bodies like precious stones wrapped in gold leaf, an army of desperate noise. The way things are planted and forgotten until they return. And tonight I go back, slicing the roads on a rusty beach cruiser that was lost to the river long ago, pedaling furiously to make it in time. I stand outside and scream up toward the unlit window, but nobody seems to hear. I have 2 more poems. Thank you guys for listening. You say I look happy in a photograph from when we were apart, and I think of the royal blue lagoon of my bed, wide ashen meadows of Friday nights I somehow crossed, bare feet stripped raw on that heather. Dawn was the tug of stitches in my mute flesh. I was a badland, heart like that predictable singular cow skull, dry wind whistling through the eye holes and jagged snout. To no avail, I implored anything but the kitchen knife to gleam. Each lace panty was a coffin I threw in the sea. How the lavender pale eyeshadow and jaded blood-colored blush dusted away among imploded letters of half-truths and truths. See, I caught your love like a ricochet bullet just when I thought I was safe, pouting violently like the bad boyfriends in movies, regretful and spoiled, but without even ambition enough to show up at your new Valentine's house, all leather jacket and switchblade, without the energy to punch holes in drywall. My red lipstick stood on the bureau uncapped that year, a zoo animal chewing its cud, a small giant tiger left in its cage at the end of the world, starving. While you were gone, in the shower it was acceptable to say your name into the clatter, to hide my face as the train car barreled out of underground darkness and became a capsule of light, for my mouth to fill with venom if anyone bothered kissing me. And when my niece and I walked through the park early June, swinging our clasped hands, she hummed that certain childhood ballad which coasts into dreaming. If I know you, I know what you'll do. She stopped suddenly and asked where you were, the way small things can be perfect on accident and wound us. I looked around. Each insect lit gold by the falling sun was a word I used to hold inside me. This is my last poem. It's called Imaginary Dream. I know you think I embellish my dreams, but I dreamt a swing set on the beach. It was silver or probably platinum because my dreams are extravagant. Its legs were dug into the sand, and when high tide came, we swung very high and jumped off into the water. I dreamt a casket big enough for both of us, so as our flesh decayed, our rib cages interlaced, like the hulls of those shipwrecks we saw beached in Italy, abandoned on the shore and leaning together. But maybe that was also a dream. And then I was in the old Cadillac with the windows down, and my sister was laughing as we traced the sheer cliffs of Route 1. She applies fast red lipstick in the rear view and winks. Oh, big sister, my very first crush, heart stoppering in my chest at your Cleopatrian beauty. I dreamt my older brother stood over the brilliant blue plume of his torch, pulling glass like clear taffy, the speaker system vibrating as if we were in the vocal cords of a titan. and over the sound he turned to me and sang, "I'll always be your beast of bourbon." I dreamt he crossed the Aegean alone that year without even his myrmidon, locked in one room for 81 days. Sometimes the guards kept his letters, marooned him in deep countries of silence, silence that echoes, silence that aches, unbearable eons of silence that freeze you solid, and to thaw, if you do, is painfully slow. I dreamt the Gregorian chanting of whales in an ocean so cold it was like gliding through solid glass, that my little brother was a grizzly bear who had to chew off both his paws to escape the iron clench of the trap, that I came to in the car with one of the older kids who used to buy us cigarettes, and my shirt was inside out. And the next day, my little brother scattered that man's teeth all over the skate park and broke his nose like communion bread. But this dream is a memory. Then you were there, beloved, standing with the sun behind you, up to your shins in daffodils, taking the first drag of a cigarette as if you held your breath between them. Or was that yesterday? I dreamt childhood was the frame of a playhouse my mother built by hand in our backyard, but couldn't afford to finish. Then morning glories trellised up the walls and wove across the roof, so being inside it on a sunny day was like being enclosed in soft, glowing stained glass. And just as in life, when she knocked on the door to play with me, she never forgot the password.
Hi everyone. So one thing I like to do with all my favorite female writers is call them my queens. So I have Queen Toni, I have Queen Alice, I have Queen Marilyn, and Justin Keenan said that's not how it works. You have too many queens. So I'm sorry to disappoint you, Justin, because today I have one more queen to talk about, and that is Miss Jessica Walker. The Japanese director Akira Kurosawa has a quote that says, "To be an artist means never to avert your eyes." And I think that's what Jessica's work does best. She refuses to avert her eyes from the stories that others do. She is the most brave and fearless writer that I know. She takes on stories and writes characters that the rest of us are way too scared to do. And she doesn't do that just because she wants to do the grotesque for grotesque's sake. She does that because to show those lives teaches us something about our own lives. She read a story this year about a Asian woman who found out that her husband was possibly looking at child porn, and that story asked us to examine what memories we suppress in order to live mundane lives. It's also been an honor to read your thesis this year through workshop. It's called The Blessing. Chris Tillman in workshop said it's probably the most heavily thematic MFA thesis he's read in recent years. And it was such a pleasure to explore those themes with you as you asked us to examine what it means to make art out of one's life. I'm not the only fan of Jessica's work. She's been published very prolifically in such distinguished magazines as Booth, The American Scholar, and the Kenyon Review. She's been nominated for a Pushcart Prize and was also featured in the Best of Small Fictions of 2018. And I think I speak for us all when I say we're very excited to see her book one day. She goes by many names: Jessica Walker, Professica, Impressica, Dressica. Everyone please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Miss Jessica Walker.
Thank you, first of all, to Jeb for that very gentle but important choke hold. You really do hold everything together, so thank you.
course, we all want to thank Barbara, whose name has come up many times today already. She is a person who always knows what to do if someone bursts into tears in the MFA lounge. So I have heard. Thank you, Barbara.
I want to thank Lisa for being our fearless leader for these years. I don't know how you do everything that you do. It's really amazing. And I think that your job title says that you're the director, because if they said like angel, prophet, empress of the world, everyone would be like, who do we pay someone like that? So thank you so much.
That was a marvelous read. It didn't feel like 3 hours. It was really just amazing. So the reception is in the rotunda, and so I think Jeb suggested following Elena, and she'll be elegantly.
I taught there.
Yeah, that's right. So if you have any questions about where we're going, it's on the west side and the lower level, and it's all set up. The wine is there.
Multi-purpose room.
Multi-purpose, yes. We're going to put it to some new purposes. And then Jeb and I are just going to take down this beautiful sign, and then we'll meet you over there. But please go over and get started.
Okay, circle.